My name is Gulamabbas Lakha. I am a researcher and tutor in psychology of religion. The focus of my work is on faith-informed therapy and how religious concepts and practices can be utilized for psychotherapeutic purposes, specifically with regard to depression within faith communities. I was new to Burton and to the anatomy of melancholy. I had heard about this, but I hadn't really studied it. And when I started looking at it more carefully, I was surprised and really enjoyed the process of looking at this text. There is some really important material that Burton shares that we are seeing in our research today. There is so much emphasis now, growing emphasis, on how religion can be incorporated into the psychotherapeutic process. And indeed, the correlations between spirituality and religion and the prevalence and manifestation of different forms of mental health challenges. And yet, Burton, 400 years ago, was on the case. Burton's approach is disarmingly simple. He advocates doing your best in the here and the now, and don't worry about a future that you can't control. And that is one of the approaches that he advocates for dealing with obsessive compulsive behaviors around prayer or excessive soteriological anxiety and a concern about the hereafter in a way that is paralyzing and crippling for the individual. On the other hand, he also advocates being aware of one's wider responsibility and the notion of ultimate judgment as a way of keeping the individual grounded and accountable to themselves for their actions and their relationships with others in the world. One of the remarkable things we see when we look at the anatomy of melancholy is how similar some of the personal challenges humanity has faced throughout the ages actually are. For even though the way in which we communicate has transformed beyond recognition, what we communicate about and how we communicate to ourselves hasn't changed all that much. What we say to ourselves, about ourselves, remains vitally important, both for our spiritual well-being and our psychological well-being. And Burton was quick to point that out. Often we are vicious in the way we speak to ourselves about ourselves, to an extent that we would never dream of speaking to anyone else. And yet we're so comfortable in automatically invoking thinking patterns that can be so destructive to us. And Burton was quite keen to make sure that, at least with regard to prayer practices, such thinking patterns should not infect the experience of connecting with divinity, howsoever one chooses to do so. Whether one is a person of faith or no faith, it deserves to be considered as a book that speaks about the human condition and the experiences and challenges of being a human being across time, culture, tradition, and geography. For those reasons, it's worth a read.